A man in his early 60s gets two envelopes in the same week. One is his Social Security disability deposit. The other is a disability payment from a program his employer participates in, $5,000 a month, and for the first time since he got hurt, he feels like he can breathe. Then the next Social Security deposit lands, and it is hundreds of dollars smaller than it was. Nobody called him. No letter explained it. 6 months later, just as quietly, the full amount comes back. What happened to that man is not a mistake, and it is not a penalty. It is a rule written in 1965, expanded in 1981, and it has a number in it, 80%. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly which payments trigger that rule, which ones never touch your check no matter how large they are, and the two things that make it stop. Let me start with the part that matters most to the largest number of you, which is the list of payments that do nothing at all. If you receive private disability insurance, the kind you bought yourself, or the kind that came through your employer as an insurance policy, short-term or long-term, that payment does not reduce your Social Security disability benefit. It can be a very large payment. It does not matter. If you receive disability compensation from the Department of Veterans Affairs, that does not reduce your Social Security disability benefit either. Those are two separate systems, and neither one is looking at the other. And supplemental security income, which people shorten to SSI, does not cause this reduction. I am starting there on purpose. A rule like this one gets discussed in bits and pieces online, and a lot of people who are perfectly safe spend a week worried about a reduction that was never going to happen to them. If everything you receive is on the list I just read, you can relax about this particular rule. So what does trigger it? Two categories. Workers' compensation, which is the state system that pays you when you are hurt on the job, and public disability benefits, which means disability payments from a federal, state, or local government program that is based on a disabling condition and is not administered by Social Security. That second category is the one that catches people, because it does not sound like a category. A disability retirement from a city or county job, a state-administered temporary disability program in some places, a civil service disability payment. These are payments people think of as completely separate from Social Security, and legally, for this one rule, they are not. Here is how to tell whether a payment you receive falls in that second category, because the name on the letterhead will not tell you. Ask 3 questions about it. Is it paid by a government body, at any level, federal, state, county, or city? Is it paid because of a medical condition that keeps you from working rather than because of your age or your years of service? And is it something other than a Social Security benefit? If the answer to all 3 is yes, assume it counts until Social Security tells you otherwise. A disability retirement from a public employer is the classic example. The person thinks of it as a pension because it comes from the retirement system and the paperwork calls it a retirement. But it was granted because of a disability, and that is what the rule looks at. The reverse is also worth knowing. A regular service retirement from a government job, one you qualified for by working long enough rather than by being disabled, is not a public disability benefit and does not trigger this rule. Same employer, same retirement system, completely different treatment, and the difference is only the reason it was granted. If you are not sure which one you have, that is a perfectly good reason to call. Nobody at Social Security thinks that is a silly question, because it is genuinely ambiguous in some systems. One more thing on that second category before we move on. People sometimes assume that because a payment is small, it will not matter. That is not how the test works. The rule does not care whether the other payment is large or small on its own. It cares about the total measured against your ceiling. A modest public disability payment can still push a household over the line if the Social Security benefit was already close to it. And a very large private insurance payment, as we covered, does nothing at all, no matter how big it gets. The size of the payment is not what decides. The source is. Now, the mechanics. This is the part worth writing down. Social Security calculates a figure for you called your average current earnings. It is meant to represent what you were making before you became disabled. Then it takes 80% of that figure, and that becomes a ceiling. Then it adds up your Social Security disability benefit and the other qualifying payment. If that total is under the ceiling, nothing happens. You keep both in full. If that total goes above the ceiling, the amount above it gets subtracted, and here's the part people find unfair. It comes out of the Social Security check, not out of the workers' compensation payment. The other program pays what it pays. Social Security absorbs the whole reduction. So, in the story I opened with, the man did not lose money because he did something wrong. He crossed a ceiling, and the agency on the losing side of that ceiling is the one that writes his Social Security check. Let me put numbers on it, and I want to be clear that these are illustration numbers, not yours. Say the agency figures your average current earnings at $5,000 a month. 80% of $5,000 is $4,000, so $4,000 is your ceiling. Your Social Security disability benefit is $1,800 a month. Now, workers' compensation starts paying you $2,200 a month. Add those together and you get $4,000 exactly. You are at the ceiling and not over it, so nothing is reduced. You keep all of it. Now change one number. Workers' compensation pays you $2,800 instead. $1,800 plus $2,800 is $4,600. That is $600 above the ceiling, so $600 comes off, and it comes off the Social Security side. Your Social Security check goes from $1,800 to $1,200, and your total is $4,000, right at the ceiling. Notice what that means in practice. The extra $600 a month that workers' compensation was paying you did not actually add $600 to your household. It replaced money Social Security was already sending. That is the whole design of the rule, and whether you think that design is fair or not, it explains why the deposit changed. One more version, because this is the one people ask about. Suppose the other payment is enormous. Say $5,000 a month on its own, which is more than the entire ceiling. In that case, the reduction is capped by the next rule I am about to tell you, and this is the important one. There is a protection built into this, and almost nobody mentions it, so I want to make sure you hear it. The reduction could never leave you with less, in total, than your Social Security disability benefit alone would have been. In other words, the offset can eat into the extra money. It cannot take you below where you started. If a phone call ever leaves you believing that a workers' compensation settlement will wipe out your Social Security entirely, that is not how the arithmetic works. Now, about that average current earnings figure, because I have to be careful here, and I would rather tell you why than pretend. Social Security does not use one single formula for it. There are several methods, they produce different numbers, and the agency uses the one that produces the highest figure for you, because a higher figure means a higher ceiling and a smaller reduction. Which method applied to your case depends on your earnings record. That means I cannot give you your number on a video, and anybody who hands you one formula and calls it the rule is oversimplifying. What you can do is call Social Security and ask two specific questions. What average current earnings figure did you use for my case, and which method did you use to get it? Those are answerable questions, and you are entitled to the answer. I want to spend a minute on lump sums, because this is where people get genuinely caught off guard. If your workers' compensation case ends in a settlement, a single large payment instead of a monthly one, that money is not exempt. Social Security converts a lump sum into a monthly equivalent and applies the same ceiling test to it. So a settlement can cause a reduction that stretches over years. This is the reason a workers' compensation attorney who understands Social Security is worth having before you sign a settlement, not after. The way a settlement document describes what the money is for and over what period it is meant to cover can change how it gets treated. That is a legal question. It is specific to your case, and it is beyond what I can responsibly cover here. What I can tell you is that the question exists and that it is worth asking out loud before anybody signs anything. There is one more wrinkle, and it is a strange one. In a small number of states, the arrangement is reversed. Instead of Social Security reducing your check, the state workers' compensation program reduces its payment. Same ceiling, opposite payer. If you live in one of those states, your Social Security check may stay whole while the other benefit comes down. It is not something you can choose, and it depends on your state's law, so it is another question for that phone call. Now, the part everybody actually wants to know. When does it end? Two things stop this reduction, and whichever comes first is the one that applies. The first is the other benefit ending. If the workers' compensation payments stop, or the public disability payments run out, the reduction ends and your full Social Security benefit resumes. That is what happened to the man in the story. Nothing was fixed. His other benefit simply ran its course. and the check came back to normal on its own. The second is reaching full retirement age. When you get there, your disability benefit converts to a retirement benefit, and this offset does not apply to retirement benefits. I covered full retirement age in its own episode, and I will not repeat it here. But if you are within a couple of years of yours, that is the date on the calendar that ends this. Before the checklist, I want to answer the question I know some of you are sitting with, which is why this rule exists at all. When Congress wrote it in 1965, the concern was straightforward. Two public systems were paying the same person for the same inability to work, and neither one knew what the other was doing. In some cases, the combined payments came out higher than what the person had been earning while healthy. The ceiling was the answer to that, and 80% was where they drew the line. You can argue with the line. Plenty of people do, and there are decades of policy papers arguing about whether 80% is the right number and whether the reduction should come off the federal side. What I would ask you to take from it is only this. The rule was not written to punish anyone, and it is not applied because somebody flagged your file. It runs automatically the moment two qualifying payments overlap. That matters for how you deal with it. There is nobody to appeal to about the existence of the rule. There is, however, plenty to check about how it was applied to you, and that is where your attention is worth spending. So let us put the whole thing into a sequence you can actually use. First, look at what you are receiving. If it is private insurance, VA compensation, or SSI, this rule does not apply to you, and you can stop worrying about it. Second, if it is workers' compensation or a government disability payment that is not from Social Security, then you are in the group where the ceiling applies, and you should expect the possibility of a reduction rather than be surprised by one. Third, report it. When you file for disability benefits, Social Security asks whether you have applied for or intend to apply for workers' compensation or other public disability benefits, and you are required to tell them. Do not skip that question and tell them when the situation changes. An overpayment that gets discovered 2 years later has to be paid back, and that is a far worse conversation than a reduction you saw coming. Fourth, if a reduction has already appeared on your check, call and ask for the specific numbers. What is my average current earnings figure? What is 80% of it? What total are you counting? If any of those inputs is wrong, and they sometimes are, a wrong input is fixable, but nobody fixes it if nobody asks. Fifth, if a settlement is on the table, get the Social Security question answered before you sign by somebody who handles both sides of it. And a sixth one, for the people who are closest to this without being in it. If you are the spouse or the adult child helping somebody manage these payments, you are often the one who will notice the deposit changed because you are the one reconciling the bank account. Write down what the deposit was before and what it is now and the date it changed. When the call happens, having those three facts turns a vague complaint into something a representative can actually look up. Without them, the conversation usually ends with somebody promising to send a letter. I also want to say something about the overpayment situation, because it is the version of this that causes real damage. If the other benefit starts and Social Security is not told, the full check keeps arriving for months while the ceiling says it should not have. Eventually, the systems catch up, and the agency asks for the difference back, sometimes years of it at once. That money has usually been spent on medical bills, on catching up. There are ways to ask for a waiver or a payment plan when that happens, and they are worth pursuing. But the far easier version of this story is the one where the reduction starts on time because somebody made a phone call in the first month. Let me close by naming what I think is actually wrong here, because I try to be honest about that on this channel rather than pretending every rule is sensible. Nothing in this rule is hidden. It is in the statute. It is on the agency's own pages, and it has been there for 60 years. But the man in my story found out about it by noticing his deposit was smaller. That is the failure, not the rule. A person who is already dealing with an injury should not have to reverse engineer a 1965 amendment from a bank statement. So the useful thing I can give you is the name of the rule and the number in it. Once you know that a ceiling exists and that it sits at 80% of average current earnings, a confusing deposit becomes a question you can actually ask. And a question you can ask is a question somebody has to answer. The usual note. I am not an attorney, not a benefits advisor, and not speaking for the Social Security Administration. This is general education about how a public rule works, not advice about your case. The figures and methods that apply to you depend on your own earnings record and your state's law. Confirm anything that matters by calling Social Security directly or talking with an attorney who handles disability claims. Now, I would like to hear from you. Has your check ever changed without an explanation arriving first? And did you ever get a straight answer about why? Tell me what happened and how long it took, because the honest reports from people who have been through the phone calls are worth more than anything I can read off a page. If this helped, subscribe. The next one I would send you to is the episode on full retirement age, because that date is the one that ends the rule we talked about tonight. I am your host at Social Security Decoded. Know the rule, then decide, not the other way around.